Hello. I recently watched some of Sea of Tranquility's panel discussion on Tales from Topographic Oceans, which is, of course, the infamous Yes album that people kind of love to hate. By the way, Pete Pardo, he's one of the smarter dudes in this whole YouTube commentary world, for music at least. I don't know any other guy that old who keeps up with death metal, black metal, thrash, prog metal, jazz fusion. He runs a good channel, it's kind of like Eddie Trunk Goes to College. Anyway, man, his recent video got me thinking about Tales from Topographic Oceans and the idea of prog double albums as a whole. Obviously, the 70s were kind of the heyday of the double album. Bands were ambitious, so it made sense that prog rock bands would dabble in the medium. Part of prog rock is this kind of long-form storytelling, the album as an art form in itself, where you sit your ass down, you listen to the record like it's a movie, you get immersed in it. Double albums don't really work nowadays, man, because filling up 2 CDs full of shit almost necessitates like a high amount of filler. You got pieces of shit like Stadium Arcadium out there. You got Bloated Ass, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, so it don't really work anymore, man. But the LP format was perfect for double albums because the overall album length couldn't be more than around 90 minutes, maybe 100 minutes. So when you only got around 20 to 25 minutes per album side, you really got to put thought into what you're doing, in theory at least. So for this video, I wanted to focus on the big name prog rock double albums and share some thoughts on them. I'm only going to be focusing on 3 albums here. There are other prog rock double albums out there like Focus 3, which I highly enjoy, but that album fits on 1 CD. And I wanted to look at, the 3 most famous prog rock double albums and how they compare and how they each represent the musical trends of the time, for better or worse. So starting off, man, I'm going to be taking a look at The Wall. Pink Floyd, probably didn't even have to say that, but yeah, Pink Floyd, The Wall from 1979. Coming in around 81 minutes long, man, I gotta admit, this one has never quite gelled for me. Basically the same reasons your average rock fan would love The Wall or my exact problems with the album. By this point, I think Roger Waters had explored the whole like trials and tribulations of a famous rock star theme to its absolute maximum, so I've never had much of an affinity for the concept. Of course, really, I mean, the album could be about shopping for underwear for all I care. I won't take points off for the concept because I'm more of a music guy than a lyrics guy. But musically, to their credit, Floyd were smart enough to smell the changes in the air. This was 1979, so punk, new wave, all that stuff was dominating the critical world and starting to break into the commercial world as well. Bands like The Police, The Cars, kind of bringing a bit of punk rock attitude to the Journey and Styx-loving masses, And, Floyd were never the most full-on prog band of the classic prog bands anyway. Their music's fairly sparse, it's never too busy. It's pretty reliant on mood and atmosphere. You don't get a lot of really super complex musicianship or anything. The Wall shows that same general philosophy being applied to, I'd say, a more radio-friendly format. I've listened to this record plenty of times over the years, hoping to one day get more into it. And while, I like segments of it, moments, a few full songs from the record, but honestly, man, I'd rather listen to fucking Atom Heart Mother any day of the week, dude. Now, obviously, The Wall still resonates with people, and Floyd are kind of the 70s prog band for people who don't like prog rock. Really, that kind of applies to Floyd and Rush. So I'm the odd man out here, but I find this record just much less engaging than Animals, Wish You Were Here. Even Sauce Full of Secrets is more fun to listen to in my book, man. So yeah, up next, man, I'm going to talk about Tales from Topographic Oceans. Now, rock music evolved a lot faster back in the 70s, whether you want to admit that or not. So musically, this is worlds apart from The Wall because 1973 was a whole different musical landscape from 1979. In 73 and 74 were the years when prog rock kind of started to reach a sort of tipping point, and it was really losing what little favor it might have won from the critics as these kind of long-form pieces like Carnival 9 and A Passion Play became the norm for prog rock and less of the exception, less of a novelty. So, I mean, when every major rock album has a double-digit lengthy suite closing out the record, a lot of critics started to ask themselves if this was what rock and roll was about, So that's when you start to see stuff like T-Rex, Bowie, the Stooges getting championed instead. But of course, the record buying masses still love prog rock, and while it's fashionable to hate Topographic Oceans due to its reputation, hell, it's worth noting that Yes was still selling out the biggest arenas in the world. The record buying public was getting stoned, dropping acid, popping Quaaludes. Most people I've met who were old enough to have bought the album when it came out generally give it a positive review. I don't know anyone who says it's their favorite Yes album, but frankly, I think it kicks ass, man. The first time I heard this one back when I was like 15, I had already heard pretty much all the other 70s Yes albums and was kind of avoiding this one because it's got such a bad reputation and it seemed like such a huge undertaking. I was like, man, 4 songs in 80 minutes, what the fuck? I was used to Iron Maiden, Metallica, that was my idea of a long song back then was, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner or some shit. But the thing is, man, all these songs have so many like twists and turns and multiple sections and different moods explored that it never feels like you're just listening to 4 songs, I mean, now conceptually, man, yeah, it's pretty over the top. John Anderson, he's big into the Eastern woo spirituality shit, which I could not care less about, but it fits the music, man. You don't want to hear John Anderson singing about getting dumped by his girlfriend or how hard it is to be a rock star. Can you even imagine a depressed John Anderson just gazing at his shoes on stage like, well, that would suck, man. So the way the album is structured, man, you can kind of zone out and listen to it in the background, or you can listen to it very attentively with like headphones and a joint, big fat joint, it lacks any of that more upbeat, rollicking sort of like riff writing you saw on like the Yes album or Fragile, but man, it's just really pleasant, moving music, man. If you judge this album as a rock and roll album, it does fail, I think. There's not much really rocking here at all. But if you judge it as a piece of music, man, you already enjoy stuff like Close to the Edge. I don't really see how you could hate this record, man. I mean, Revealing Science of God is awesome. Ritual, I think Ritual is better than anything they've done since 1977, probably, man. So, and we know Rick Wakeman likes to talk shit about this record now, man, but people seem to forget, he's the guy who was pretentious enough to do fucking King Arthur on Ice. So, and he hasn't had a good record since Six Wives of Henry VIII in my book, man, so I don't care what he has to say. Last album I'm going to talk about here, which is also my favorite of the bunch, is Genesis with 1974's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. This is another one that kind of has a bit of a negative reputation outside of prog rock fan circles, much like Topographic Oceans, although not quite as dismissed or infamous as that one. A lot of people hold up The Lamb as an example of when prog rock goes too far with the conceptual shit and the weird noises and shit. But frankly, man, I think if you can't find any good songs to latch onto on this album, you're probably just a bit of a dumbass, or you've listened to way too much punk rock, you've listened to too much indie rock, and your musical sensibilities are probably too informed by the rules of rock and roll romance, and all that stupid shit. First time I heard this album, I was expecting it to be like impenetrable, but from the opening title track, man, you're treated to great, catchy melodies. People say Genesis sold out in the 80s, but they always had a knack for like accessible songwriting. No other prog rock band could have written a song like Cuckoo Cocoon, Count Out Time, Chamber 32 Doors, Lily White Lilith, all that stuff. It's highly musical, highly catchy. It's not bloated. There's not really a second wasted. It's not wanky, which I hate that word, but people say that like if you play more than a few notes, you're wanky, you're pretentious and wanky, and then they go back and listen to the fucking Smiths. But yeah, Genesis had more songwriting similarities with like later day Beatles than they ever did to something like Vivaldi or Stravinsky. So it's not hard to see why this band launched 2 of the biggest pop star careers of all time, I think. Of course, referring to, Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. Conceptually, man, I'll admit The Lamb is a bit over the top. You got the shit where Rail has to cut his own dick off and like wear it as a necklace and shit. I mean, it gets pretty over the top, but honestly, man, it almost occupies like a sweet spot between like the kind of mescaline ramblings of Topographic Oceans and the kind of emotionally charged, reality-driven reflections of The Wall. Because while the album's story does deal with fantasy, it uses New York City as a backdrop, which Gabriel, he attacks like consumerism and a lot of like modern issues. You got that song, Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging, which is obviously an attack on consumerism and advertising and stuff like that. It's not just sword and sorcery and ancient Greece the way people tend to portray the album. Now, I'll admit, I can't explain the last side of the record really, or what the fuck ends up happening to Rail, but I don't know, man. Musically and to a lesser extent conceptually, this record seems to be dipping into the first half of the 70s and the second half of the 70s, man. So you can almost look at it as kind of a prog rock turning point of sorts, man. Somehow it sounds pretty modern to this day, man. My only real complaint is sometimes you forget Steve Hackett's even playing guitar on the record. But man, everything worked out, because that's why we have great records like Voyage of the Acolyte. So all is well in the end. So there you have it, man. My thoughts on the 3 big prog rock double albums of the 70s. Feel free to share your thoughts, like the video, subscribe, all that shit. And thanks for watching, man.